My father left me $4 million. But when my stepmother, who cheated while he was dying of cancer, sued me, karma destroyed her in ways she never saw coming. I'm 24 years old. I study film with a focus on camera work, and honestly, I need to get this story off my chest. Because what happened in the last few months with my father's inheritance basically blew up what was left of my family. And even though part of me feels bad about how everything ended, another part honestly feels like justice was finally served. You know, in that weird way, the universe sometimes takes care of things. My dad, Robert, died about 6 months ago from cancer. He was 48, and he left a will that unleashed drama so big, I still can't believe it all actually happened. I guess I should start at the beginning. My mom died when I was born, complications during childbirth or something like that. I never knew the exact details because my dad didn't talk much about it. I think it hurt him too much to remember. So I grew up with just him for the first 10 years of my life, and honestly, those were the best years I had with my dad. He was a movie producer, pretty successful in our small local film industry. We live in a small coastal country, but with a surprisingly active film scene. And even though he worked a ton, he always made time for me. He'd take me to film sets, explain how everything worked, buy me toy cameras and then real cameras when I turned 8, and basically that's why I ended up studying film. Because he infected me with that love for movies and storytelling. When I was like 12 years old, we moved to the main city in the country, where the film industry hub is, because my dad got this huge contract with a big studio. I was excited. You know? New city, new school, new opportunities. But things got ugly almost immediately. At my new school, there were these 2 boys, Connor and Cole, twins or maybe just brothers, I'm not sure, and they decided I was going to be their bullying target. I don't know why. Maybe because I was new. Maybe because I was quiet. Who knows? But they made my life impossible. They'd push me in the hallways, make fun of me, hide my stuff, and one day they pushed me down the school stairs. It wasn't anything super serious, like I didn't break anything, but I got a pretty bad sprained ankle and had bruises all over. My dad was furious when he found out. He went to the school, talked to the principals, threatened to sue, the whole thing. But the problem was he was working like crazy at that time, literally Monday through Sunday producing 2 movies simultaneously, and he couldn't be watching over me all the time. So he made the decision to send me to live with my grandparents, his parents, who lived like 3 hours from the city in a smaller coastal town. At that moment, I felt abandoned. Honestly, like he was sending me away because I was a problem. But now I understand he was just trying to protect me and give me a more stable environment. My grandparents are incredible, literally the best people in the world, and I lived with them from age 12 to 18. During those years, I saw my dad often. He'd come visit me every 2 or 3 weeks. And I'd go to the city during vacations, but it wasn't the same as before. You know what I mean? There was this distance between us that didn't exist when it was just him and me. When I was like 15, he called me and said he had important news. And turns out he had gotten married to a woman named Victoria, a divorcee who had 2 children. He didn't ask what I thought. He didn't introduce me to Victoria before getting married. He just informed me like it was a done deal. I felt betrayed, honestly, like I was being replaced. And when I asked him why he hadn't told me anything before, he just said things had happened very fast and he knew I'd be happy for him. Spoiler alert, I wasn't happy. The next few years were weird. I kept living with my grandparents and finished high school there, and then I applied to film school in my dad's city because, well, it was the best in the country, and also because part of me wanted to be closer to him again. I guess I got accepted. Moved to the city when I was 19, and here comes the part that still makes me feel like I'm in a horror movie. Turns out Victoria had 2 children, Connor and Cole. The same boys who had bullied me 7 years earlier. The same ones who pushed me down the stairs. I didn't know until I went to dinner at my dad's house the first week of university and saw them sitting there at the table. I almost fell backwards when I recognized them. They recognized me too, obviously. But they acted like nothing happened, like they hadn't made my life impossible for months. My dad had no idea they were my bullies, because I had never told him their names. At that time, I was 12 and too scared to mention specific names. So when I told him that night during dinner, he went pale. Victoria immediately jumped to defend her sons, saying they were just kids back then, that people change, that I should get over it, basically minimizing everything. My parents argued hard that night, I left early, and afterwards, my dad and I had a conversation where he basically told me he was so sorry that he didn't know what to do because he was already married to Victoria, and that he hoped we could find a way to coexist as a family. I tried. I really did try. But Connor and Cole kept being jerks. They didn't bully me directly like when we were kids, but they treated me with this obvious disdain, made passive-aggressive comments, and basically acted like I was an intruder in their mom and my dad's life. And Victoria was another level. I quickly realized she had seen my dad as an ATM with legs. She was always buying expensive things, jewelry, designer clothes, redecorating the mansion my dad had bought. Yeah, mansion. My dad was pretty wealthy by our country standards. And her sons basically used my dad to finance their lifestyles without working much or contributing anything. When I was 21, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. Aggressive cancer. Advanced stage, doctors said he maybe had 2 or 3 years left with treatment. And it was devastating. I literally felt like the floor opened up beneath me. My dad had been my hero my whole life. Even with the distance and the problems with Victoria, he was still the most important person to me. I left university for a semester to be with him. I accompanied him to his chemo treatments, stayed with him in the hospital when things got bad. We'd spend hours watching old movies together like when I was a kid. And you know who wasn't there? Victoria and her sons. At first, they still showed up occasionally, but as my dad got worse and worse, as the cancer started winning the battle and he began to look sicker and weaker, they basically disappeared. Victoria stopped going to the hospital, said she couldn't stand seeing him like that it was too painful for her. You mean, seriously? And Connor and Cole only showed up when they needed money for something. My dad noticed. I know he noticed. I saw the sadness in his eyes. When he'd ask about Victoria, and I had to make up excuses for why she hadn't come, the last 6 months were the worst. My dad was in the hospital almost permanently. The cancer had spread everywhere, and doctors weren't talking about treatment anymore but about keeping him comfortable. I slept in a chair next to his bed almost every night. My grandparents came every week to visit him and would stay for hours with us. But Victoria showed up maybe 3 times in those 6 months. 3 times. To see her husband dying. Every time I saw her at the house, because she was still living there, obviously, spending my dad's money, I'd beg her to go see him, that he missed her, to please spend even just an hour with him, and she always had some excuse. That she had a spa appointment, that she wasn't feeling well, that she had to take her sons somewhere, anything. My dad died in February of this year, at 5 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was with him, holding his hand, and my grandparents had arrived around 3 in the morning because the doctors had told us it was a matter of hours. Victoria arrived 15 minutes after he died. Literally arrived when he had already passed. She didn't cry, didn't look particularly sad, just asked about the funeral arrangements and if my dad's lawyer had already been contacted. In that moment, something in me broke, like all the sadness I was feeling mixed with this rage I had never felt before. And I had to leave the hospital room because I knew if I stayed, I was going to say horrible things to her. The funeral was a week later. Like 200 people came. Producers, directors, actors, technicians, all the people from the film industry my dad had worked with for years, and everyone shared stories about how incredible he was, how generous he was, how talented he was. Victoria was there with her sons, dressed in designer black, acting the part of the grieving widow, and all I could think about was all the times she wasn't there when he really needed her. 2 weeks after the funeral, my dad's lawyer called all of us for the reading of the will. Victoria was there with Connor and Cole. My grandparents came with me, and the lawyer started reading. And here's where things get interesting. My dad left me 70% of everything. 70% of his fortune. His properties, his investments, his royalties from the movies he produced. Everything. He left my grandparents 20%. And he left Victoria and her sons 10% to divide among the 3 of them. Victoria turned livid. Literally, her face went through like 5 different colors in 2 seconds. She started yelling that this couldn't be legal, that she was his wife, that she had a right to more, that this was an insult. The lawyer very calmly explained to her that everything was completely legal, that my dad had updated his will 2 years earlier, when he already knew he had cancer, and that his wishes were very clear. But wait, because here comes the best part. As part of the inheritance, I inherited the mansion, where my dad and Victoria lived. The entire house, with everything inside it. I gave Victoria 2 weeks to find another place and get her stuff out. She sent me like 50 hate-filled text messages, telling me I was an ungrateful bitch, that I had stolen her husband. You mean, what? That I didn't deserve anything. That she was going to fight this in court. Connor and Cole also sent me threatening messages, saying they were going to make my life impossible, basically trying to intimidate me, like when we were kids. It didn't work. The 2 weeks passed and Victoria hadn't moved out, so I had to go with the police and literally have her evicted. It was a spectacle. Her screaming and crying while officers took out her stuff, neighbors watching, a total mess. I felt bad for like 2 seconds, but then I remembered all the times she abandoned my dad when he was dying, and that guilt just evaporated. The following week, I went to visit my grandparents for a few days because I needed a break from all the drama. And when I returned to the mansion, I found that someone had broken in. Victoria and her sons had broken a back window and entered the house. They hadn't stolen anything, but they'd messed everything up, pulled things out of closets, basically searching for who knows what. I called the police immediately, filed a report, and started the process for a restraining order against all 3 of them. And here's where my dad's plan really revealed itself. The lawyer asked me to come to his office because there was something else in the will he needed to explain to me privately. Turns out my dad had included a special clause related to Victoria. Basically, if Victoria could prove she had been a faithful wife during their entire marriage, she could receive an additional 30% of the inheritance. But if it was discovered she had been unfaithful, she would lose even the 10% that had already been assigned to her, and all that money would come to me. It was a trap. You know what I mean? My dad knew something I didn't know. The lawyer presented this option to Victoria 2 days later. He explained that all she had to do was sign a document consenting to an investigation into her fidelity during the marriage, and if she came out clean, she'd get 30% more of my dad's fortune. Victoria, being the greedy person she is, signed the document immediately. She was so sure there was no evidence against her, so confident she could get that extra money, that she didn't even think twice. She even smiled when she signed, like she was already spending that money in her head. A week later, the lawyer presented the evidence. Photos, videos, hotel records, text messages, everything. Victoria had been having an affair during the last 1.5 years of my dad's life. During the last 1.5 years. While he was dying of cancer, while I was sleeping in hospital chairs, while my grandparents were traveling 3 hours every week to be with their sick son, Victoria was at luxury hotels with some other guy. The photos were very clear. The videos were very specific. There was no way to deny it. My dad had known, had hired a private investigator months before dying, and had compiled all this evidence specifically for this moment. Victoria's face when she saw the evidence, to something I'll never forget. She turned white, then red, then started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of rage because she had just realized she'd lost everything. The lawyer very professionally explained to her that, according to the terms she herself had signed, she lost the 10% that had originally been assigned to her, and that money now passed to me. Victoria started screaming that this was illegal, that she'd been tricked, that she was going to sue, that her lawyer was going to destroy us all. She stormed out of the office in a fury, dragging Connor and Cole with her, and obviously she sued. She filed a lawsuit alleging the will had been made under coercion, that my dad wasn't in his right mental faculties when he wrote it. Lie, there was a medical certificate proving he was perfectly lucid, that I had manipulated him, that the lawyer had helped me deceive her. Her lawyer presented a case full of unfounded accusations, and the legal process began. During the following months, Victoria did everything possible to make my life impossible. She tried to convince my grandparents I was a horrible person who had manipulated my dad against her. My grandparents literally hung up on her. She sent me threatening messages from unknown numbers. She showed up at my university one day and tried to confront me in front of all my classmates, yelling that I had stolen the life she deserved, until security escorted her out. I had to get a full restraining order against her. Then she tried another tactic. She went to various people in the film industry, trying to make them see me as the villain in this story. She told them I had poisoned the relationship between her and my dad, that I had manipulated him into changing his will, that I was a horrible daughter who only wanted the money. The problem with this plan is that everyone in the industry knew my dad. Many of them had known me since I was a kid, And when they started investigating a little more, they discovered the truth about Victoria's affair and about how she had abandoned my dad during his illness. The plan backfired completely. Connor, who worked as a production assistant at a studio, was fired because nobody wanted to work with the son of the woman who had cheated on one of the most respected producers in the industry. The lawsuit kept moving forward. Victoria's lawyer presented increasingly desperate arguments, including one that alleged I wasn't mentally fit to handle the inheritance because I clearly had emotional problems based on the fact that I had been seeing a therapist, which, hello, is completely normal when your father dies of cancer. During this time, Victoria keyed my car, leaving me a lovely message that said something like, "This is just the beginning, bitch." Yes, with spelling errors and everything. I had to install security cameras at the mansion because I was afraid she'd try to break in again, or worse. The case finally went to court around August. It was 2 days of testimonies, evidence, legal arguments. Victoria acted like the perfect victim on the stand, crying, talking about how much she loved my dad, saying the affair had been a mistake she made because she felt lonely and abandoned, conveniently forgetting to mention that she was the one who had abandoned him. Her lawyer presented testimonies from friends who supposedly could testify about my bad character and about how I had treated Victoria badly for years. Our side presented the photos and videos of the affair, the hospital records showing all the times I was there and she wasn't, testimonies from nurses and doctors, my dad's medical certificate proving his mental capacity, text messages between my dad and his friends where he expressed his pain over Victoria's betrayal, basically overwhelming evidence that Victoria had been a horrible wife and that my dad had every right in the world to leave his fortune to whoever he wanted. The judge took less than an hour to decide. He ruled completely in our favor. He dismissed all of Victoria's allegations, confirmed the will was completely valid, declared the fidelity clause was legal, and that Victoria had signed consent for the investigation voluntarily, and basically said Victoria had no right to appeal or claim anything else. Case closed. Victoria left the court screaming again. But here comes the final twist I didn't expect. Connor and Cole, who had been supporting their mom through this whole process, had a huge fight with her in the courthouse parking lot. Apparently, they had discovered something I didn't know. Victoria had promised to divide any money she won from the lawsuit with them. But they found messages on her phone where she told her boyfriend, yeah, the same one she cheated on my dad with, they were still together, that she planned to keep everything and send her sons to find their own lives. Connor and Cole were furious because they realized their mom had been using them all this time, just like she'd used my dad. The fight was so intense that several lawyers leaving the courthouse had to intervene. After that, Connor and Cole cut contact with Victoria. I haven't spoken to them and don't plan to, but I heard through third parties that they got normal jobs and are trying to rebuild their reputations in the industry, now that they don't have their mom supporting them. Victoria, as far as I know, moved to a small apartment with her boyfriend, who turns out isn't rich like she thought either. So now she's living a completely different life from what she expected when she married my dad. And me, well, I decided to give the mansion to my grandparents. It's too big for me, has too many bad memories of Victoria and all the drama, and my grandparents deserve to live comfortably after everything they did for me and my dad. I moved to a smaller apartment near my university, resumed my film studies, and a month ago I accepted an overseas project working as a camera assistant on an international co-production. It's a 1-year contract, and honestly, it's perfect for me because I need distance from everything that happened. I still think about my dad every day. Sometimes I feel guilty about all the drama his will caused, but then I remember he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew Victoria better than I did, knew she was going to show her true nature when it came to money, and he left me not just his fortune but also the satisfaction of seeing justice done. It's a strange kind of gift, I guess, but it's very typical of him. Always thinking several steps ahead like a good producer. Last week I was organizing some boxes of his, things my grandparents brought me, and I found a letter he had written for me before he died. In it, he told me he was sorry for not being more present when I was a teenager, that marrying Victoria had been the biggest mistake of his life, and that he hoped the will would give me the financial security to pursue my dreams without worries. At the end, he wrote, "Make incredible movies, my love, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't." I cried for like 2 hours after reading that. So that's what I'm going to do, I guess. I'm going to make movies. I'm going to travel. I'm going to live the life my dad wanted for me. And Victoria can stay with her mediocre boyfriend in her small apartment, thinking about all the money she could have had if she'd been even minimally decent to the man who gave her everything. Karma is a bitch, as they say.